let's get into it and welcome from the Green Party, MP Hūhana Lyndon. Thank you for joining us this evening, Hūhana. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Kia ora, kia ora. Thank you for having me.
Oh, look, absolute pleasure. Love to have you on board. And it's our first time with you, so thanks for being a part of us. We want to talk about Uncle Winston Peters, old Winnie the mate, old mate Winnie. You are Labour's spokesperson for media and broadcasting. Is that the correct title? The Greens. What did I say?
Wrong party, Uncle.
Sorry, I can't even realise what I said. The Green Party spokesperson for broadcasting media, that portfolio. I want to have a listen. I know this is going around on the news and stuff at the moment, but have a listen to kind of a full 3 minutes here of the whole part of the conversation.
You've got to hear the whole thing. It's amazing.
Winston Peters had with Dann this morning. Well, it's not the whole interview. The thing about the interview, Winston starts the interview accusing them of being bad faith. Maybe I'll play it at the end. But his very first question, Dann starts speaking to him, and Winston goes, "Can I ask you a question? Why did you play that piece of audio from the BBC?" Now, I don't know what piece of audio played because they don't have it in the story. I actually phoned RNZ today to try and find it. I think it's got something to do with Keir Starmer, and he came out and he made a comment about the Scottish Supreme Court ruling. But Winston started off bang like this. And all the way through this interview, he is, I mean, you're kind of going to roll your eyes because you're going, yeah, that's Winston. He is pedantic. You know, Dann says that they cancelled something and they didn't cancel it. They just moved it to another MP. He goes, it's like, honestly, it's like pulling teeth listening to this interview. And then they get about 2/3 of the way through and we get this interaction.
Okay. What would be your message today to a transgender...
Sorry, I should make clear. We all know this, but this is about the New Zealand First bill to define men and women and men in law or in legislation, just to check.
Woman who has perhaps had a operation, who has been living and identifying as a woman for many years, who has already been subject to potentially higher levels of abuse or risk of suicide because of the way they have chosen to live, who will now feel further threatened by this. What would you say to them?
Well, that's nonsense. We are not saying we're interfering with their views and what they want to do. That's fine. But it will not infringe upon the fundamental rights of people who belong to a male or female.
Does it infringe on their rights?
Female in this case. Pardon?
Does it infringe on their rights to not be discriminated against?
Well, the reality is that they are asserting rights which do not come with who they are. They are not female. They are not in the sense that you're saying so. And because they decided that they're going to take off their trousers and put on a skirt, they can walk in the woman's bathroom, he's not going to be condoned. Can't you get it? The mass majority of New Zealanders do not accept what the so-called elite in Parliament, who've got no authority, no mandate, to decide they're going to change the way the world
works. Well, let me just finish then with a question on that, because your opponents, the Greens and Labour, but certainly the Greens, and have argued that you are just importing a culture war here as a distraction from your failure to deal with issues that New Zealanders do care about, like a failing health system and the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, well, this is so typical that RNZ in your form would start putting their arguments.
Well, that's my job, Mr. Peters, to put up an argument. No, I'm sorry.
We won't stop it, but it is. I think it's very good to hear Dann go, enough, this is our job, because you notice that Winston at no point actually answers the question. That's classic Winston. I also found it interesting, something that's just happened. I mean, if one wanted to be on the side of Winston and make an argument for why this legislation should be enacted, even those of us who disagree with the legislation could probably come up with a better rationale or reasoning than bathrooms. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a lazy, put on a frock and go to the wrong bathroom. I mean, it's lazy enough to do sports, but bathroom seems to be one step lazier. I did put in a request to speak to Mr. Peters today. Funnily enough, we didn't hear back from them, but it's that same question. What problem are you trying to solve, Mr. Peters? But if his example of this massive, change that they're going to make in legislation is because of who sits down or stands up to pee, it seems to be the most minor of all the examples if you wanted to make that argument. Like if you're on a debate team at school and that was the debate you pulled out of the hat, it seems like a pretty piss poor example of the serious nature of what even their side is saying. Do you want to speak to that at all, Hūhana, before we keep going with play?
Yeah, I mean, just generally, it's outrageous, the statements being made and the purpose for having this members' bill. Shouldn't we be seeking for an inclusive society where all members of our community are welcome and their rights are upheld? And so, it's really sad to listen to some of the rhetoric that's coming out backing the need for this legislation, because it's a complete distraction from the important issues that New Zealanders really genuinely do care about.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going, because this is obviously twofold. First, there's the conversation around his bill, and we're happy to give you runway for that, Hūhana, if you want to speak to that. But the second part is the threat that Winston Peters is about to make to RNZ.
Not going to accuse me of putting up their arguments and believing in them. I'm the devil's advocate here, and I put up the argument for you to answer.
I thought your job was to hear both sides of the story.
It is, and if anyone who looks at this interview will see that is exactly what I've been doing, and I'm trying to get you to answer that question.
You're doing most of the talking, aren't you? The fact is you're paid for by a taxpayer, and sooner or later we're going to cut that water off too, because you're an abuse on the taxpayer. You're not hearing both sides of the story. You keep on putting the argument of the woke left. You're a disgrace to the mainstream media ethos that used to be in this country.
Mr. Peters, it's my job to do that. I don't have an option.
Your job is to be an interviewer. Your job is to have, when you put me on, you hear what we got to say. When the Greens on, you hear what they've got to say. When the National Party's on, you hear what they've got to say. But not you. When it's our turn, you're interviewing and you're intercepting all the time. You're interjecting all the time. When they come on, it's a very placid, lovely interview, isn't it?
Well, I would disagree with that and argue that is not the case, and that we are fair and fierce with all who come on this program.
Oh, but if you think that, then tell me why there's a massive drop in the mainstream media's confidence in the public. Less than 33% think you've got anything to contribute, and it's going to fall away, because once great program, which was about the emergence of a culture called New Zealand, has decided to go down the side on the left, and it's so...
Okay, Mr. Peters, thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate it, as always. That is the New Zealand First Leader, Winston Peters.
There you go. And that's the end, obviously, of that conversation. So the threat made at the end, and Hūhana, that's why we wanted to get you on for the spokesperson for broadcasting media. Sooner or later, we're going to, quote, cut that water off. Now, some may say this is just Winston being Winston. However, when you get a feeling from this government about the possibility of cuts coming to RNZ anyway, let me get an article here that says this. As other media companies feel the pinch, sources say Media and Communications Minister Paul Goldsmith and Finance Minister Nicola Willis and their officials are taking a laser-like look at RNZ's funding ahead of the budget next month. All budgets are under scrutiny, a spokesperson for Goldsmith said yesterday. Decisions will be made as part of Budget 2025. Peters told reporters at Parliament today that he had not had any discussions with Cabinet colleagues about RNZ funding. Of course, it's appropriate for me to ask, on behalf of the taxpayer, are we getting value for money here? So, to him to say that they're going to cut the water off at some stage, in a atmosphere where funding for RNZ is already sort of under question, does put another element of seriousness on that statement, wouldn't you say, Hūhana?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it goes to, the way with which the government is operating right now and the lack of management of those ministers who are speaking right outside of their portfolios. There is no mandate for Winston Peters to be even having an opinion, let alone threatening funding to RNZ. We know that every dollar is being scrutinised, and RNZ is no dissimilar to other agencies that are under the pump right now to demonstrate that they are quality and that they are delivering for New Zealand. And RNZ's absolutely neutral. They give everyone, a hammering. And it's the government of the day. He's there to speak about his bill, and Corin was just doing his job.
Yeah, I think so. Chewie, your thoughts?
Oh, so many thoughts about this interview. I think anybody that says, "Oh, this is just the sort of explosive shit that Winston loves to do," is ignoring the decline this, like, I've seen him be combative in his interviews. I've seen him be across his facts on a topic that he knows about. It's clear on this one, he's fucking adrift. And all he has is attack straight out of the gates. Now, the man's been a politician for somewhere between 43 and 106 years. His only other job before that was, I think he was a lawyer for maybe 4 years. I think he still calls himself a lawyer. I don't know how current you have to stay with that. I think he was in the room when they invented laws for the first time. He certainly had no background in media, so I don't know what authority he thinks he stands on when he can tell someone that works for RNZ how an interview works and what the job of an interviewer is.
We have to remember he's done this before, though, eh? He did this to Jack Tame on Q&A as well, with the veiled threats. And is that really, you know, the type of leadership that we need right now? Because we need media leadership. We need the fourth estate to be independent and be able to 100%. Critique any policy that comes before the people of New Zealand. Corin was doing his job.
Yeah, and it's more important than ever having a public broadcaster, with the private ones not being able to survive, and with this government perhaps being a little less keen to pass on the NZ on air funding to private media entities. So it just actually means that the public entity is probably never been more important than it is right now. Sorry, Chewie.
I was just going to say, the only other thing that is very clear is as bad as it is, as much as it makes his cognitive decline absolutely transparent, the reason it's a tactic is because Corin's line of questioning is, okay, you're introducing this bill, how will you enforce it?
Yeah.
And he doesn't have an answer because there isn't one. It's impractical. It has no basis. It absolutely wipes out another piece of legislation that is locked in, that his party voted for, Greens voted for, Labour voted for, ACT voted for it, and National. It was a clean sweep. The self-identification. Like, everyone went, yep, this seems to be a good idea. And now he wants to wind that back unilaterally. And the fact with this being a members' bill, like, the mechanics of this is, it's not going to happen. He has 4 MPs that can put this in the biscuit tin. All of them already have bills in, so he's got to convince someone that their chosen cause isn't more important than this piece of hot garbage. Then it's got to be drawn. Then it's got to go through the process. This is never going to see the light of day. It is a dog and pony show for Winston, and that is it.
Just to echo the idea of, you know, I don't want to say this in a too disrespectful way, but however you say politely, not the full quid. Let's say he's not the debater he used to be. It was very evident that Dann was, as you say, Chewie, we didn't play it, but in the interview was saying, how are you going to enforce this? How will this be enforced? That's what he was asking. This is Winston Peters' response after the interview. Remember, Dann was trying to ask him how he was going to enforce the law. Winston's tweet says this: arrogant wokester loser, hello Trumpian, Dann on RNZ asked me this morning how we would, quote, force our members' bill defining a woman in law, end quote. No, he didn't. He didn't ask that. He was asking how you were going to enforce the law, should it become law. Newsflash, Corin, we can't force you to stop being so delusionally woke. The sooner you and your mates... I really hope this is Winston typing this out, because if this is a PR person or his press secretary, you need to get another job. Like, this is so bad. This is so poorly written. This is so far off reality. If this is not written by Winston, someone needs sacking. Speaking of New Zealand Doge, I found a salary we could get rid of pretty quickly if it's not Winston. Anyway.
I think I know how this works. He hammers it out on an old-timey typewriter and then rips it off and hands it to someone who then tweets it out on the phone.
So he doesn't use like a hammer and a chisel and a bit of stone?
Oh, shit. No, you might be right.
Might do that.
Yeah, it might be chiseled on slate.
And then he attaches that to a pigeon and sends it down the corridor. several pigeons. The sooner you and your mates wake up and stop being so out of touch, the sooner our country will get back to some common sense. Welcome to the front line of the war on woke. P.S. Corin, you keep wondering why the media have record low levels of trust from the public. Keep it up, champ. See how it's going to end for you. I mean, like, honestly,
The gallows?
that's like a 13-year-old has written that. That's what I'm saying. If that's not Winston, if that's actually a professional press person, they got to go. There we go. We've just saved the government 120K. Hūhana, thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, just the way that the whole argument's being articulated is just really poor form for the Deputy Prime Minister. And it goes to the point that where is the Prime Minister in managing his team? You've got the Deputy Prime Minister attacking Radio New Zealand and its independence to be able to interrogate an issue, which the line of questioning was quite reasonable. Well, let's look at the interview and what went down. I've listened to it a couple of times and I was just in shock because ultimately whatever we present as politicians should be able to go forward to the media and then we engage in the debate. It didn't even get across the first, the start line because it was just attack from the outset. And so where is the Prime Minister on this? And to really pull in his deputy and say, this is not okay. We need to be able to front and speak to whatever policies we are presenting. And this is a members bill too. So, we know the machinery and the mechanics of where a members bill will go. But ultimately, it's just poor form and he's so experienced. And he's been a really good, effective communicator in other settings. Why go straight into battle mode on a fundamental issue that they are really front-footing right now and distracting from what really matters to New Zealanders?
I know where the Prime Minister is. He is where he spends most of his time. He's in a Koro lounge somewhere in the world. Like, I don't know where, maybe it's the London Koro lounge. Maybe he's gone to Rome. I don't know. It's one of them, but that's where he is right now. Hey, Hūhana, I'm interested. This is not really part of the topical conversation for tonight, but with what you've just said and what we've just said all about Winston, and at the same time him, coming off the Deputy Prime Minister title, and the rumour mill going around talking about early elections, you got anything you can share with us? Any insight?
Let's see where things go. But ultimately, these types of policy announcements just really feed into the rabbit hole that turned right and just builds up this momentum that attacks the rest of us as New Zealanders. And I'm really aroha because it's a distraction from the need for a really good health system to be able to have safe, warm, dry homes for all New Zealanders and just do the work on the key machinery. Show us the good work that this government is putting into place rather than sending us down a rabbit hole and turning right and digging us further into this separatism and division. It doesn't help us as a community nor as a society.